Again, on this Labor Day, September the 4th, 2017, let's go ahead and give some of this history because it is important to know history, world history, but more importantly, you ought to know the history of where you live, and not just the United States, but even the history of the county or parish that you live in behind the enemy lines of USA Inc. Because, you know, I'm quite disturbed by some of the headlines that's being put out attacking Antifa. I think that's how you pronounce it. And Antifa. Yeah, that's how you say it. But it stands for anti-fascist. And we had a interview with Daryl Lamont Jenkins, who is a member of that. And he is a black person, but we wanted to get, a perspective from somebody who's familiar with that movement, which does not eschew violence. And everybody again want to keep stuck on this nonviolent stuff and expecting people to be nonviolent. And you had Trevor Noah, the South African black person who began working on The Daily Show, replacing Jon Stewart in 2011. He come out with a little skit. And again, I know most of this programming that you see on corporate media, corporate television, cable, all of that, they have producers, and most of these people that's in front of the camera are basically reading a script. Again, this guy doesn't have a journalist degree or anything like. He's a comedian, just as Jon Stewart was a comedian. But they figured out a formula to entertain young people, because they're real popular with young people, by joking about everything, turning everything into a joke. And so he was like calling them ISIS vegan or something, like a lighter form of ISIS. And excuse me, but I don't think any of those people involved with Antifa are cutting people heads off or trying to convert people to a religion or any of the things that ISIS is said to be doing. I don't see them armed and taking over counties and trying to spread and start, you know, and just attacking the United States like, you know, the Confederates did and all of that. But how can you, again, words are very important. And so he's trying to play word association, or they are trying to, those who produce that show will put those words on paper and that then put it on the teleprompter. And then the words came out Trevor Noah's mouth. They're playing games, very dangerous game to, you know, the word association game. So when you think ISIS, you also think Antifa, who, quite frankly, as I stated on past broadcasts, is doing the work that law enforcement refuses to do it. And that's because law enforcement has been infiltrated by neo-Nazis, Klan members, and they historically have always been involved in slavery. And then with the rise of the neo-Confederacy after the Civil War, law enforcement has always been involved in that. So I see law enforcement protecting white supremacist terrorists, and I see Antifa out there fighting white supremacist terrorists. So you tell me who's the terrorist and who's providing support to terrorists. It isn't Antifa. It isn't them. And so again, you know, whenever we dealing with corporate media, we have to be real careful. We have to analyze and critically think about what these people are saying and how they are saying the things that they are saying. Because like Malcolm X said, and the reason this station was founded, or this platform and the organization that manages it was founded, was because Malcolm X, as well as others, but he was the first one I came across who pointed out to me the importance of media. In fact, he called it the most powerful entity on the face of the planet because it controls the minds of the masses, can make the innocent look guilty and the guilty look innocent. So here we got Antifa. They're trying to make them be akin to terrorists simply because they use violence to battle white supremacist terrorists in the streets. So what? Doesn't the United States government, y'all be talking about, you know, supporting the troops? And I'm a veteran. I'm a U.S. veteran. Nobody seems to hold it against me except for myself now, because I'm a lot older and I like to think wiser. But nobody holds it against me that I participated in a violent action against a sovereign nation, getting involved in a foreign dispute that didn't really involve or should not have concerned the American people. The United States uses violence all the time. One of the reasons that Martin Luther King Jr., one of the speeches he gave before he was assassinated was talking about the United States being the greatest purveyor of violence on the face of the planet. But people like Trevor Noah, who's nothing but a paid propagandist for the left, just like the paid propagandist for the right, they're all part of the establishment. And then he talks about labels. Well, what about this label, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, progressive? I don't buy into labels. But you have him, you have Nancy Pelosi, members of the Democratic Party, and certainly you've had Donald Trump. In his infamous speech after Charlottesville, tried to equate these young men and women out there battling terrorists in the street because law enforcement is protecting them instead of going after them. The United States government and these states support them, give them nonprofit status. That's sanctioning terrorism. But then they want to talk about adding Antifa to some kind of terrorist watch list or whatever list that they're keeping, the U.S. government is keeping. I say push back against this. We know. To me, Antifa is the only group out there that's doing something that's just. And it don't matter to me that they use violence because these people that they're fighting in the street threaten violence every day, have a long history of violence. And a great North Carolinian by the name of Robert F. Williams once said that you meet violence with violence. That's the only way certain black communities were survived. The ones that did not, you read about, that did not, well, you don't read about them, but most of the black communities that were successful, that you know about, all have one thing in common. They were destroyed by white terrorists, burnt down to the ground, the people run off, people murdered, mass murder. Now, the ones you don't read about is like the community that I live in, like the black community that Robert F. Williams lived in on the other side of Charlotte in Monroe, in that little town. The ones that, to me, were successful are the ones that's still around. And that's because they picked up the gun and used their Second Amendment rights, not because somebody said we had the right, because we are human beings and we're going to use intelligence and common sense to know that if men are coming to our homes, to our places of worship to terrorize us, and they got firearms, well, the only way you can meet that violence is with violence. And that is why some of these older black communities, like the one I live in, are still around if they have not been gentrified, because they always use that non-violent tactic to displace people. And they will use violence if those people won't go. So don't talk to me about violence or we have to condemn violence. Matter of fact, one of the reasons why you've had a lot of social political activity, some would say it goes back to Gina 6 in Louisiana, where they tried to enslave those young men by overcharging them and giving them a harsh prison slavery sentence. Y'all remember that? Then shortly after that was Trayvon, then Mike Brown. And there's been activity and people organizing in various ways attacking the unjust system of slavery that we see. So, and if you want us to talk about, it's because of violence is the reason why we've seen all that. But Labor Day, Washington Post just posted an article today, and it says, who started Labor Day? The bloody and confusing history of an American holiday. See, you can't look throughout American so-called history in the things and the people that they celebrate, that the society as a whole celebrates or tolerates, and it all speaks to violence. It all promotes violence. It puts violent men and not so much women, but it puts violent people on a pedestal to be worshipped, to be idolized. And I'm not saying anything new. Malcolm X had said it many times before. Very government that's using violence to prevent you from enjoying your liberties and freedom. It's the very government telling you got to be nonviolent in your pursuit of happiness. So, we gotta fight back against this state-sponsored propaganda. Trevor Noah, no, they are not ISIS, vegan, whatever, with your stale joke telling self. Need to go back to South Africa and help them fight against racism and white supremacy. Instead of coming here, taking the job of an African-American who should have that job talking to us about America. And definitely Trevor Noah doesn't speak for me as a black person trying to say that black people are afraid of Antifa. No, I'm not afraid of them at all. So, again, we have to be careful about what we consume. And I'm saying we do need to gather this intelligence. If I hadn't seen that and someone pointed it out to me, I wouldn't be able to tell you about it. But we had to critically think about this story. Let's not go along and laugh and joke and that gets embedded in your psyche. Then all of a sudden you anti-Antifa, and you don't even know why. Oh, because that was planted in your mind. These are violent people. They're terrorists. How dare they go out there and fight these white supremacist terrorists who are just trying to exercise their freedom of speech. And again, I keep saying it. As a veteran, I did not serve 6 years in the U.S. military to recognize a terrorist's right to anything but to die. That's all they can do for me. You're listening to Black Talk Radio. In just about 5 minutes, we should be joined by our first guest.